Hey everybody, Dr. Mary Crouley. I'm here with Mary Flynn O'Neil of America's Future. We just got breaking news right now, Mary, about Ashley. Why don't you share the news?
Sure. So we just heard from our president that the Americans have sent the fighters over, their planes over, and have bombed the nuclear facilities over in Iran, which is very detrimental to the existence of our world right now, because we do not need nuclear bombs going off, and we need to make sure that people understand that the Islamic forces are very evil. Okay, these people have been oppressing Iranian people who know freedom. They've known freedom. They know what this is, especially women and children. And they are working very close with CCP. So enemies are working together, which is very dangerous. Right? Very dangerous when you have enemies like that size working together. So that has been it just happened about 8 minutes ago. I think that President Trump just tweeted out that these facilities, and that they were successful at these bombs and they got them. So these facilities have been blown up and off they go. Our soldiers are safe. And then, now we have to deal with the aftermath of this, which in our country, we all need to be very vigilant because we've allowed these cells to be in this country, and they're in areas of our country that this Islamic kind of element in our society has existed, and now we have this problem in our country. So Americans need to be aware of that. In New York City, there's a report that is saying that the Islam have gone into the train station in New York City, and they're causing chaos. So these are places that we need to stay away from and let our law enforcement and our military take care of this kind of stuff.
Well, and when you were talking about a sleeper cells, there's some intel reports there could be as many as 200,000 sleeper cells in America.
Right.
And, and so this is why we are in a spiritual battle, everybody.
That's right.
But if you look at what happened, even in certain instances, remember in the Old Testament where there's more that be with us in the spirit realm with the angelic hosts and be with them. And so that's why we have to really pray and trust God that if God be for us, who can be against us? And that's where it says in 2 Chronicles 7:14, if my people humble themselves, pray, seek his face, but lastly, turn from our wicked ways.
Right.
Then I will hear from heaven and heal your land. So right now we are at a Rev 17 event here in Yuba City at the Church of Glad Tidings. And we're talking about, this pervasive, this horrible condition of the world with child sex trafficking. And it's something that people don't really want to think about.
Yeah.
Understandable. I'd rather be thinking about something else.
Right.
But if we don't, you know what I mean? God says he'll judge us.
Yeah, well, we got to deal with it, because actually it's not just trafficking, Mary. I want to say something, because, I go around the country and I do these summits, and we go into churches specifically because that's where a lot of pastors don't understand this stuff, and they don't understand the fact that many of these decrepit and perverted people hide in churches. They can hide very easily in churches, and they can get away with manipulating people and being friendly with people. And where there's children, they will be there. So that's something that these predators do. So we go around and we do this, but what we want to understand is that these are crimes, all crimes against children. I think people get tired of, they get used to the fact that you say child trafficking, and they get used to that, they're trying to make it normal, right? So what I say is it's crimes against children, crimes against humanity, because it's grooming, it's all of it, it's labor, sex labor, slave, all of it is these crimes against children, which nobody should be committing crimes against children. First of all, they're not a commodity. These people look at a child as a commodity. It's all about money, and it's funding the globalists. It's bigger than guns. It's bigger than drugs.
Yeah,
it's bigger. It's a $350 billion business. It's an industry I want to put out of business. That's what I want to
do. Well, excuse me, and that's the thing. They do infiltrate churches. and this is where they're around where children are.
That's right.
I have somebody close in my family. I don't want to say who they are, but they were at a Christian preschool
Yeah.
and 4-year-old, and where it was, a couple mornings a week, Christian preschool, and it had happened.
Yep.
The Boy Scouts, I mean, you look at all these different things, and I just got done interviewing Kathy O'Brien,
Yeah, I know.
and that's what they do is they say, if you tell anybody, I mean, I have a film called Freedom Cry,
Yeah, that's right.
and I've interviewed many of these girls. My film is very redemptive because, excuse me, I'm getting over this little allergy thing. At the end of my film, every single one has a story of redemption.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because, and even the pimp,
Yeah.
now a pastor.
I know, isn't that something? What you're saying is so true, because all the and the voices, one of the things that I think is very important is the victim, the survivor, the overcomer. Their voices are very important. We can learn from them a lot. And one of the things that I've realized is a lot of their stories, and many of the stories, like when they're being traumatized, when it is the act is happening to them, they have been able to go to another place, and
Right.
and many of them talk about the story of going to another place where Jesus was. And I think it's amazing how those stories are, because he's watching over. People always say, how does God let this happen to me? Well, first of all, we have a free will, and he doesn't want to hurt. He doesn't want children to be hurt, but he does take care of children and people that are being traumatized. He does. There are stories over and over, and they're very similar. And I've kind of I've heard these stories, and they all seem to be he's taken them to another place, and they've been able to out of body kind of experience, and it's been with Christ, and it's been with a holy kind of feeling. So that's amazing.
Well, it's dissociative identity
Dissociative.
disorder, and they literally go into another part of their brain. It's God's way of
Yeah.
helping the trauma, because otherwise it would be too painful.
Yeah.
But there comes a point where then the trauma starts coming back.
That's
They
right.
forget.
That's right.
And Kathy O'Brien, we were talking about how the ways of healing
Mhm.
by writing it out.
Mhm.
And literally, that's why they took cursive out of the schools,
I know.
is because the actual cursive and something about going from your head to your heart to your hand,
Yeah.
writing it out, it actually releases the trauma by identifying it. The neuron pathways in the brain then are actually activated instead of being suppressed,
Yeah.
and you can heal from it
That's
and
right.
release it.
Well, and that's why a lot of kids, like write music, they want to rap, or they do things like that. They can at least tell their story and get it out. I mean, art is amazing. Even art, drawing and painting and all that. I've seen that, and even horses. Horse therapy, all these animal therapies, all these kinds of
Yeah.
things. They are something that it's great to be able to do that and help these victims.
Well, I heard you speak last night, and you talked about. Now, my mom and dad were raised in the Twin Cities in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and we had 7 brothers and sisters, 7 children. My dad called it Roman roulette because they didn't believe in birth control. So it was
Well, my
funny.
mother was on the rhythm. She used to
Well,
say
that's what I mean, the
That's right,
rhythm.
the rhythm. Oh, my
Roman
mother-
roulette.
She swore by it. She
And
did.
she had 9
And she had
children.
9. And we're all like 2 years apart. There's 3 sets. So there's the 3 oldest. There's 3 years between that and the second set. And then there's 3 years between those 2 and the third set. And that was rhythm. And I'm like, that's because he came home from war or wherever he was, because he was in the military for 20 years. But it is funny because she swore by it. That's it. The rhythm.
Well, and you were talking about how your mother would drag you guys around
Oh,
as
yeah.
she would speak in front of these
Oh, yeah.
pro-life, to these different
Yeah,
politicians.
she was something else. She let him have it. It's the fight. Michael was funny because Michael talks about it all
You're
the
talking
time.
about your brother.
My brother, General Flynn, yes, he talked about it all the time, and I love to hear him say this story because my 2 brothers are generals, okay? And by the way, it's the first time 2 generals since the Civil War were brothers. So it's a very historical thing. And they weren't
Huh.
West Point. They didn't go to West Point. They went to little old URI, Rhode Island, University of Rhode Island. So they're like, that's why they call them the people general, because they're not wealthy. We weren't wealthy. We weren't anything. We were just 9 kids going to college. My father said, get into ROTC or you're going to get into trouble. And so they did. And that's where they became. It's hard to be a general. It's a very, very long path in life. You have to be dedicated to the country to be a general. I mean, you give your life to, I mean, they all do, but you give your life to the country when you become a general. And so what was funny about Michael was my mother always had he could drive. He was older than me, 2.5 years, 3 years older than me. And he was always like the guy that was taking my mother's stuff around and doing whatever. And then he could drive, and she would put us in a parade, one time we were in an Irish parade in Newport, Rhode Island. And it was the first time that the pro-life movement started showing the body parts of the aborted baby.
Wow.
Do you remember that? Do you remember that? That was,
Yeah.
They changed their whole kind of perception. They had to shock and awe people
Right.
about it. And my mother had all of us in a parade, an Irish parade for St. Patrick's Day. And my brother Michael was driving the car with the float on top, and all these kids and all these pro-life women, all these women were walking down the street, and the pictures of the body parts were on the car as the float.
Wow.
And people were flipping out. People were all, of course, drinking, because the Irish,
Right.
they start drinking at 8:00 in the morning, some of them 5:00 in the morning. And here
Was this on St. Patrick's Day?
in Newport, Rhode Island, St. Patrick's Day. And here comes
We used to go
pro-life.
down. Same thing. They had a big in St. Paul. They had a big St. Patrick's Day parade. Everyone drank green beer.
Oh, yeah. That's weird. But here comes a pro-life float that Michael made, and she's got all of us and all the body parts, pro-life and all the body parts. People were dying. They were like, just. And my mother made that statement. She was telling the Catholics, the Irish Catholics, you better wake up. We're killing too many babies. And she was right. Look at where we are.
Wow.
Look at the amount of babies that have been aborted. It's insane. But my brother watched her, and he watched her, and you can see the fight in him, because this is where the fight came with my mother. We watched her, and we watched her run against senators, run against state representatives, and all that. Had no money, and she only
So
ran.
she actually ran for politics.
She ran.
And did she ever win?
Nope. She ran on the pro-life platform. And we used to say to her, Mom, you could win if you just talked about, you're a school teacher, you have an economics degree, you're very, no, pro-life, I'm running. She was making a statement. She was trying to get, and it was a man's world back then. Okay.
Yeah.
You understand? I mean, she'd be in her hundreds. She'd be 100 and something now. But, back then it was a man's world. No, women didn't run for office. Very rare, especially in Rhode Island, a place like Rhode Island, Democrats. She was a Democrat. She was a JFK Democrat. She was a pro-life conservative, and she ran on pro-life. And we watched her do that. And that was very nervy. That was a big thing for us to watch her do. And Michael always tells a story about her, how she was yelling at the senators because they were telling her to go back and raise your kids. What are you doing in politics? They were giving her hell, and she wouldn't stand for it.
Now, where was your dad?
Right there, standing right there with him. He was right by her side. He was awesome. He was a big, strapping, handsome man. Nobody messed with Charlie Flynn. And he stood right by her, and he stood right by the kids. He was a really good father. We really, really lucked out with the parents we had. They were in love with each other. Really, he had to be in love with each other to have 9 children. They were in love with each other.
Yeah.
And he had a lot of respect for my mother. Like, really respected.
Now, what did he do?
He was a banker.
He
was a banker. He was 20 years in the Army. He was a master sergeant in the Army, retired. I was the last kid. I was in Germany. I was born in Stuttgart, Germany, Munich, Germany. And he got out in 1961. I'm 63. 1961, we moved back over to Newport, Rhode Island. They had 2 more children. And he went into the banking business and
Mm.
worked his way up in through the banking business as a became a vice president. He was a smart guy, but he was a banker. He wasn't a guy who banged nails. You know, he could.
But see, this is the important thing. See, my mom and dad,
Yeah.
grew up in, Minnesota, in the Twin Cities. Joe and Pat, Joe and Pat Jensen, really good looking, handsome couple.
Yeah.
My dad played hardball, baseball. He was, all the kids would come over to our house.
Yeah.
Never saw my mom get mad one time.
Isn't that something?
It was just amazing. But there's something about being a father. And that's why in Malachi 4, the very
Mhm.
last chapter in the Old Testament, it says, I will turn the hearts of the fathers back to the children,
Yeah.
and the children's heart back to the fathers, lest I strike the earth with a curse.
That's right.
Because the fathers in a home, I think, are actually
Oh,
more important than
They
mothers.
are. They are. There is. I'm on your same page because it's really important that we understand how really important it is. And they did this in our society, in this country. They took the father out of the picture. And when they did that, they destroyed a nation. You can destroy a nation by that. And
Well, that's
it's
what they did
very
with the
important.
Black American
That's
families.
right. That's right.
They
That's right.
basically gave them more money if they didn't have the father there.
That's right.
They set them up for prison. They put the crack in the neighborhoods. I mean,
That's exactly right.
at one point, you guys, in the country, in the early 60s, from stats and people I've talked to, they said I don't like to say African American because a lot of people say
No,
Black American families, actually their marriages, they had better marriages than.
they did before that kind of campaign to destroy. Well, Margaret, it goes back to Margaret Sanger with the
Sanger.
Sanger with it. Is that what it is? Sanger, isn't it? Sanger?
Margaret Sanger.
Sanger. Well, so she was a woman that was highly racist.
Planned Parenthood.
Highly racist. I mean, she wanted to eliminate the Black population, and she was a woman. I mean, that was like your first kind of ugly feminist movement, kind of hate men kind of thing, and her direct force, her direct reason was to just destroy the Black community, and that all came into what you're talking about. Taking the father out of the picture was no coincidence.
Do you know that Bill Gates' father worked on the board with that Planned Parenthood?
Yeah. See, these people are all connected.
Yeah,
They are. They're all connected.
they are.
And they have groomed people too to be in certain positions too. I mean,
Well, and that's what they've done with Hollywood. We were talking about this earlier. They've literally, even with Disney, I was talking about Kathy O'Brien, about Walt Disney and all the different things. I mean, look they always took the mother up. Bambi gets
That's right.
killed. You had these traumatic things for
That's
little
right.
kids movie to have these little animals die, their parents die.
Oh yeah. It's horrible. I mean, we're talking about the programming.
Yeah, the
and
programming.
grooming, yeah.
But the trauma is where they literally can start conditioning the
Yes,
mind.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, that's right. They can, once they get the trauma, they can do anything they want to do to manipulate that child or person, or make them do whatever they want to do, and control. Right? The whole thing is to control.
It's all about control. So now we're here, and we just got this news about, what happened in Iran. And so we're at a crossroads.
Yeah.
Our culture is at a crossroads.
Yeah.
And one thing that God showed me, Mary, that it says, when Elijah went and God told him this is a showdown with the prophets of Baal.
Yes.
Same with Gideon. He was told he had to cut down the altars of Baal and Ashtoreth.
That's
But
right.
his father, to his credit, stood up and he said they wanted to kill him. He said, hey, let Baal defend himself.
Yep.
His father stood up, but God showed me, do you know that when it said he's going to turn the hearts of the fathers back to the children, God showed me that many of those mothers, when they had the orgies and whatever they had, that the mothers, once you carry a baby 9 months, a lot of those mothers did not want to put their babies on the altar.
I know.
That's what I saw. They were begging, like, no, please don't. But it was the fathers that said, no, I don't want to have to raise this person. I want to whatever. And so that's why it's the father's voice.
It is. You're right. Absolutely. It is, because a woman, and I was in that situation as a young woman. I was 2 years at college, and my first husband, I knew all my life. We were friends, and I got pregnant, and I was, I did contemplate the fact And I knew when I got pregnant too.
I mean, you contemplated abortion?
I no, I never once contemplated the
Okay.
abortion. I knew when I got pregnant though. I knew the moment I got pregnant, it happened. And I never contemplated any abortion. What I'm saying is I wasn't going to tell him. I was going to take, I was going to have the baby. I was thrilled to have the baby. I was thrilled. I felt joy, love, everything great. And I was not going to, I knew I was going to be a single mom, and I was happy to do that. There was no welfare when I was growing up. I mean, I never thought of going on welfare. I was not a part of my life. I was in college. I had it all planned out, and I wasn't going to tell the father. But he was in the Marines, and he called me up, and knowing the family that I came from, I felt I was not giving, that wasn't right for me not to tell him that he would be a father. However he was going to take it, but I was ready to take it myself. And if he had turned me away, that would have been fine with me. I was happy to have a child. I knew the connection and the love that I had for this baby that was inside me. And so I told him, and he was thrilled. I mean, you take that chance. A young woman who gets pregnant, you take that chance. You take that risk. They're either going to love it or they're not, and it's sad for these women that, can't do that. But on the other hand,
So then when you told him, did you end up getting married?
We did. We got married. We did. And I had 2 children. I had another son. My son, Ed, is walking around here with us. Yeah. So I had a little girl, and then a couple of years later, we had another boy. We got married. We went off into the Marines because he was in the Marines, and, lived in Chicago. She was born in Chicago, and he died though. He died at 40. I lost him at 40 years old. He was in the air wing, so he flew C-130s. He came home every night smelling like fuel. Honest to God, I thought it was so inside of his body that I was like, "You're gonna get sick. Nobody can take that kind of exposure to the kind of chemicals you're exposed to." And lo and behold, he got sick at 36 and died 4 years later. Of sarcoma of the connective tissue. And so my children were 15 and 17 when he died, and it was very difficult for me. It was very hard because teenagers know exactly what's going on, and they weren't happy. It was hard. So,
well, it's interesting she's talking about this. When we grew up in the Twin Cities, and my mom and dad ended up taking in girls in our home that got pregnant, and from like smaller towns or whatever, and they didn't,
That's awesome.
And so with the Catholic Charities, and they ended up, and then they'd have the baby, and then give up the baby for adoption, and then they'd go back to, wherever they were.
Yeah.
So we probably had about 7, 8 girls that lived with us growing up. When you have 7 kids, so
I know. There's always a bunch of kids.
One of them was even
around.
a nun.
Was she?
Oh yeah, really attractive girl named Janelle.
And she got pregnant.
Yeah.
Yeah. Isn't that something? Well, I mean, I felt a connection with that baby. That baby, I was dying for that baby. So we're
living for the baby.
We're talking about. Well, I mean, I would have died for that baby.
Right.
I mean, I would have done. I still would when they were born. But it's like that is a true feeling that a woman has with their children. I mean, you do feel that it changes your life when you become a mother, and it's a gift from God. And you have to respect life, Well,
and I think this is interesting what we're talking about right now, and how this is such an important conversation, because we're talking about humanity, and we're talking about life. We're talking about years of, growing up in a generation where they still valued life,
right?
And what happened even in the movie that I'm working on, a biopic movie about the 60s. It was in the 60s, from what I've learned, is that a lot of it was by design that they brought in the hippie, excuse me, don't trust anybody over 30, the generation gap, looking at the 50s and the happy days and all that they actually, the whole Timothy Leary, the LSD, it was all by design.
Yes.
That they wanted to bring in this rock music, the LSD, and to divide the families.
Yeah, that's right. That's
Many of the like Frank Zappa, and I guess Jim Morrison of the
Yeah.
Doors. His father was, I think, an admiral in
Yes,
the Bay
they
of
were
Tonkin
military. They were military. Yeah.
during the false flag in
That's
Vietnam.
right. That's right. So you're talking about the infiltration of the CIA at that point
Yes.
too, and the experiments that they were doing, like you talked about Kathy O'Brien. So I have another family friend who his father was very similar. Military guy doing he actually patented something, and they used he had 9 children. They used she's just one of the girls is just remembering some of the things that happened. All their kids were experimented on. So they used to
Wow.
use their military kind of assets, their people, and use their children to experiment. Use their experiments on. And you're talking about the infiltration of CIA in Hollywood and all these places. I mean, Mike Smith talks about the office. There's an office that they actually had in Hollywood. The CIA had an office, and they started to change the movies
Yeah.
to change society.
Yeah.
It wasn't these, movies that were great, wholesome, family, whatever. It was more to change society now, to groom the society, and that's what the CIA. We've been a big experimental project.
Well, on
in
the
this
top of
country.
Lookout Mountain,
Yeah.
that's where it was. That's where Disney
Oh yeah.
would do a lot of the propaganda
That's right.
films,
That's
and
right.
that's why they always wanted, like, even
That's
some
right.
of the, they wanted to make the FBI and the CIA
That's
and
right.
the
That's right.
MI6 and all. They all,
That's
I
right.
mean, it looked like good guys.
Well, so some of the that's right, because one of the things that Mike talks about, and he doesn't talk about this much, Mike Smith, is he talks about when he was doing movies, he was being trained by military guys. So the CIA would bring in the movie guys, the movie directors and movie people would bring in all these military guys to train him and train, the people, the actors. So they were doing they were working with the military to do these movies, which is interesting.
Well, and that's why,
Military.
years ago, probably 20 years ago, because I've been doing interviews and things for 20 years in the studio and things. And one day I woke up, Mary, and I heard the voice of the Lord speak to me, and he said to me, I want you to build a studio to rival Disney and call it Destiny. And I go like, I don't really want to build a studio. I don't know how to build a studio. And see, God's always looking for people that are willing to go all the way.
Yes.
And so then, I probably done 2000. I had a director. We did in a studio. We traveled around. I did a lot of different things. And so it was like 5 years ago. I mean, God just started saying, now's the time. And so the thing is, we just trademarked Destiny Film Studios last year. Now,
That's
have I
amazing.
done many films? I've done one film on trafficking called Freedom Cry. The reason I bring it up is we're at an appointed time
Mhm.
that God's exposing all the corruption,
That's right.
and he's leveling the field, and
Very
he's going to, he
fast.
told me the greatest movies, the greatest music
Mhm.
is getting ready to come.
That's right.
It'll be the greatest show on earth.
It's right.
And it's not going to be
I
all
agree.
Christian film, but it's going to
No.
be, it's going to be films that have a message. And so that's why Destiny, I believe we have to create content where it doesn't have the F-bomb, it doesn't have all this stuff.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Clean it up, right? Clean it up because kids are watching. It's children that we have to really worry about because they watch everything. They have access to everything on these phones and all these games and all this stuff. They know, and also children they don't have the parents around. Like we had parents that were watching us, and we didn't have all these kind of technology things, but they were watching what we were doing. Kids don't always have that in their families anymore. I mean, single moms, some of them are working 3 jobs to raise their kids. I mean, there's not enough adult supervision that is really watching what kids are doing. They can get online. They can get to where they need to get to if they see something they want to watch, and they become addicted.
Oh yeah.
They become addicted to things. That's why kids are watching pornography. That's why things are, and we need to clean that out. We need to start to stop that stuff from happening.
Well, we almost need to tell the kids, the parents, like, the stove, hey, there's a hot stove.
Yeah.
We almost need
Yeah.
to say, listen, you are going to see this.
Yes.
And when you do,
That's right.
it's going to be very bad for your brain. It's going to actually cause something bad to happen. You need to understand that, because if kids knew that if they started watching porn, like I think if kids were addicted or teenagers get addicted,
Mhm.
they can't even actually get an erection unless they watch
Well,
porn.
that's right. That's
See, this
that's
is something,
happened. Yeah, no.
the
that's
average
right.
age of
That's
ED
right.
is 30. maybe even younger.
Oh, I know. I know. My husband, remarried, and I've been remarried. This man who God sent. About 6 years later, my first husband died, and I met this man, and he's wonderful. He's been a father to my kids. He's just an amazing man, and he played rugby, 25 years of rugby. Okay, and the younger guys. So he was one of the older guys, but so he's 78 this year. The younger guys were taking Viagra. I remember this happening when those pills started coming out.
Yeah.
They were younger and younger, because my husband used to tell me, these guys are taking something, they're taking this. And I'm like, what are they taking? And so that was all coming out, and it was, they were targeting young guys, and the pornography whole thing was happening. And it was like, they didn't need that at all, but they were getting it, and they were getting it over in other countries, in Canada. I mean, the blue pill was the joke. I remember the blue pill was the joke. But these guys were like 30 years old that were taking it. And I used to say, he was kind of my husband was a mentor to these kids. And he would tell me, and I'd say, you better tell these guys how bad that is for them. They're never going to be fathers. They're going to get so addicted to this stuff, and they're going to ruin their bodies by always constantly having that stimulation, and it's wrong, and they're never going to have relationships with their girlfriends and their wives. Half of them were divorced by the time, 10, maybe some of them didn't even make 5 years in marriage. I mean, it devastated. Those things devastate. That's pharmacy. That's the pharmacy, right?
The big pharma.
The big pharma.
Well, and so, as we just kind of, it's a unique show to.
That was a terrible
But
thing.
so the situation is, the enemy or Satan is after the family. That's what they're trying to do with the gender dysphoria, the LGBT ideology, the schools, the communist agenda, the 45 points that they want to do, which pretty much has been implemented.
Absolutely.
So we're all here at Peace of Heaven.
Yeah.
We're all here at Rev 17 conference.
That's right.
And you spoke last night. I'm speaking tomorrow morning.
Yeah, good.
And so
Wonderful.
Mary, the people that are watching,
Yeah.
you were in a family, 9 children.
Yeah.
2 brothers, General, Flynn, and your other brother is Joe, right? General
Charlie.
Oh, Charlie. Okay.
General Charlie Flynn. Yeah.
But you also have a brother,
I
Joe.
do. I have a brother Joe. He's the baby.
So people that are watching,
Yeah.
because really God created families.
Yeah.
He created community.
That's right.
The enemy tries to isolate. That's why the masks 6 feet apart. There was no
No.
scientific. It was just they wanted us separated.
That's right. That's
So,
exactly right.
I believe the best is yet to come.
Oh, I think this is a great time to be alive, don't you?
Yes.
I'm thrilled at what I do. I'm the happiest I've ever been in my life, and I'm happy to fight this. This is a good fight to be in.
Well, as they say, fight like a Flynn.
Right.
And so how can people fight like a Flynn? You're in it to win it.
That's right.
You're in
You
it
gotta
to
fight
Flynn
like a
it.
Flynn. That's right. Don't give up. Don't give up. It's worth it. It's going to be worth it. The peace that the Lord has promised is coming. That peace is coming.
Well, now where can America's Future?
So americasfuture.net, okay, and go to our website. We have some incredible libraries that people can use, with that local action, national impact, right, Michael?
Right.
But these libraries, election integrity. There's a law and policy that teaches constitutional law and our rights. It's amazing, because that's what we do. The 3 arms. We build citizenry. We have a law and policy. We have 112 cases in the Supreme Court we have been fighting. We have probably 40 cases right now in the Supreme Court up in these cases. And we're fighting big cases. And then we have Project Defend and Protect Our Children. That's the family. So it's family, faith, and freedom. And those arms are very important to us. And so we do a lot of things. Now I have a whistleblower program. I have all kinds of good stuff that's happening. This year coming, we're going to be getting in the role of the church. We're going to be fighting against, pastors that are not doing their job, their spiritual leaders, even priests. I want to fight. If the role of the church was real, if they played their part, we could save this country right now. So,
well, we don't need that many. That's why even with Gideon,
That's right.
it's like, Gideon, and he blew the shofar, 32,000 came. God said, let the fearful and unbelieving go first. 22,000 left. And then basically you said, okay, the ones that are the watchmen that are looking on the
You said
watchmen,
it.
those are the ones, the 300. So you know what? Right now you're on the board of Peace of Heaven.
Yeah, I am. And I'm happy to, because this is an area where, so, my drive was all these children that are lost, all this stuff going on the border, all this stuff. My problem is our society going to be a society of criminals? Are we raising criminals and perverted people, adults that are, what are we doing here? And so with all these children, all this devastation, we need places for these children to heal and become, I believe they'll become the leaders. I believe the Lord will heal these children with the right people, because not everybody's the right, this is an economy that has developed in this child
Right.
trafficking. It's an economy. And many of these people have been doing this for decades, and we're still here. So I want to put it out of business. I want this to be out of business, but I want facilities. I want places for children like Peace of Heaven to come. We need to heal. Pastor Dave and his wife can do this. I've seen them do this deliverance.
Right.
It's very important. They do
Yes.
they do a special thing for the Lord, and this is a spiritual thing. So the first 72 hours of a child being rescued, an intake, that intake is very important, because that's where the spiritual peace can come into. And that's where guys like Pastor Dave can do their work on deliverance, because many of these little kids have that, unfortunately, they have that dark, it's caused the demon, I mean, we've seen it with the children that have been rescued. They can go into personality problems where they're happy, and then all of a sudden they're going to kill you. You know what I mean? They could become a demon, and we need to. This spiritual battle is real,
Right.
so we need to heal them spiritually first.
They need deliverance
First,
they need to be healed. Yes.
number one, I think it's number one.
Yes.
Is that intake becomes a spiritual intake?
Yes, it's a trauma.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, Mary, if you also want to go for the Peace of Heaven to help with this project, you go to peaceofheaven.life, and you can help become just donate even $1 a day.
Oh yeah. It's
$30
worth it.
a
It's
month.
worth it. These are the kind of things you want to put your money into is places, good places where children can be healed properly. And oversight is important, and I know that that's a big thing with this Peace of Heaven is that there will be plenty of oversight. We got to break off from the foster care and the child service. We got to break out of that system. We got to get people involved in taking care of children. Really good people. There's a lot of good people too.
Yeah, no, there is.
So.
Well, listen, thank you so much,
Thank
Mary Flynn O'Neil, Fight Like a Flynn. And thank you for watching. Now is the time. Now is the time. We have to take action. And I think it's the Lord told me the best is yet to come. Now, we are in the midst of a war, and I think it's going to get worse. But you know what I'm saying? I was talking to Lee Dundas earlier, and she made a comment about, when I interviewed her, that when times of war, they found out that there's really no, how did she say it? Like mental instability, meaning everybody was focused.
Right.
And so it's like everybody was focused,
Yep.
On this. If you look back in the history of war, like World War II in particular, World War I, some of these World War Wars.
We all pulled together. People pulled together.
They pulled together. And so, you know what? We're in a spiritual war against the demonic realm. And we need to pull together. And we really need to realize that the battle is not ours. It's only God's.
That's right.
But
And pray.
anyway.
And pray. That's the best thing you can ever do. If you can't do anything, pray.
Yes. Yeah. He says, 2 Chronicles 7:14, he said, if we humble ourselves, pray, seek his face. But lastly, we need to turn from our wicked ways. And so then the promise was, I will hear from heaven and heal your land. It's really God that is going to come and heal our land. But we have to be the ones, the church, the believers, the people that trust God. We have to be the ones that's on our knees, but also taking action and building community and unity through peace. And Peace of Heaven is one place I think that is going to be a good place to put your finances and resources into.
Absolutely.
So listen, thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching.
Thank
Now is
you.
the time. Now is the time. So please share this, subscribe, follow, hit the notification bell. do what you can. Please, share it. And we hope to see you soon, because I'm still going to be doing more interviews here in Church of Glad Tidings. God bless you. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.